Mary Berry might be one of the cheeriest bakers on TV, but not every part of her life has been as sweet as her signature Victoria sponge. In 1948, 13-year-old Mary Berry spent 6 months in the hospital fighting polio. While she didn't need an iron lung, the disease twisted her spine and permanently affected her left side, including her hand. She had to learn to walk again, but she doesn't dwell on the difficulty.
I was only in hospital 6 months, and I've just got a curved spine and a bit of a funny hand.
During her first month in the hospital, she was isolated in a small glassed-in room without knowing why. Her parents could only wave to her from behind the glass. Later, they were allowed to visit her for 1 hour, twice a month. Once, her usually unaffectionate father walked her pony 4 miles so she could pet it from her bed. After living in a hospital full of sick children for so long and watching some of them die, that visit gave her hope that she would eventually be well enough to leave. As a result of her experience, Berry has strong feelings about the polio vaccine. In an interview with Express, she said, "If you're in a hospital like I was, with people in calipers, people in pain, people who weren't going to get better, I think everyone should take the vaccine, not query it, and think of others." Berry married Paul Hunnings when she was 31, later in life than many women of her era. 2 years later, she became pregnant, but later miscarried. In her autobiography, Recipe for Life, she wrote, "I'm thankful that it was an early miscarriage, but it was still very distressing. Paul was hugely sympathetic and did his best to cheer me up, taking me out to restaurants when we couldn't really afford it, but of course he was terribly upset too." Berry had been diagnosed with a bicornuate uterus, a congenital condition which led to a series of 3 miscarriages. She then went to specialist George Pinker, who delivered several royal babies. Ultimately, Berry and her husband had 3 children together, Thomas, Annabelle, and William. Still, looking back, those early failed pregnancies were emotionally difficult for her. In the 1960s, Berry started as the cookery editor for Ideal Home's sister magazine, Housewife. She wrote about all sorts of food-related topics, created recipes, and did her own photography. But in 1968, Housewife folded and merged with Ideal Home without warning. While everyone else working for Housewife was fired, Berry and her assistant moved to Ideal Home. Berry became Ideal Home's cookery editor, while the previous cookery editor was moved to the home section. This former editor resented the transfer and made things difficult for Berry from day one. At first, she insisted that she oversee Berry's work. She even went so far as to tell the editor-in-chief that Berry was missing deadlines. It took 5 years, but the persistent complaints eventually got Berry fired. Her coworkers spoke up about how invaluable she was and tried to get her rehired. But as Berry writes in her autobiography, "I'd had quite enough of the whole nonsense and told them I'm going anyway." Of all the tragedies in Berry's life, the most devastating was the death of her teenage son, William, in January 1989. William was home from school for a weekend visit. He and his sister Annabelle had stayed up the night before, looking through old photographs and reminiscing. The next morning, he asked her to drive with him to get a newspaper he needed for a class. Berry grew anxious when they hadn't returned home for lunch by 1:20 p.m. Then, a policeman arrived with the news that they'd been in an accident.
And he said, William was no longer, and Annabelle's in Wickham Hospital. And I thought, oh no, not 2.
William had been fooling around, driving erratically, when he hit a wet spot and flipped the car. While Annabelle had just a few scratches, 19-year-old William died instantly. Berry says in her autobiography, "Once the initial shock subsides, you realize that the bottom has fallen out of your world. I couldn't cook, I struggled to sleep, we lived on soup for a long time, and I ended up losing 1.5 stone. William's death changed her. She became more religious, stopped worrying about the little things, and changed her outlook toward life and death." Berry is a founder patron for Child Bereavement UK, which helps other parents who've lost children. In 2020, Berry's name and face were used in a scam. Customers were buying products on what they thought was Berry's recommendation. Then the company hit their bank accounts with extra charges. 2 companies used her fake endorsement to sell facial lotion and CBD oil. Through computer magic, she appeared in ads, seemingly holding one of the CBD oil bottles in her hand. Berry told the watchdog on BBC's The One Show, "We began to get emails. There's a cream and you recommend it. If you say it's good, we thought it was worth spending the money. I was absolutely shattered." Because the commercials claimed relief from chronic pain, she guessed people believed she used it for arthritis. One of the companies, Bionic Bliss, claimed the ads came from third-party advertisers using third-party marketers and denied overcharging customers. However, one man who signed up for buy one get one free CBD oil for the equivalent of about $69 was charged an additional $150 and $89 with additional fees scheduled for the future. Despite its claims of innocence, Bionic Bliss dissolved in 2020. Gardening should be relaxing, but it didn't work out that way for Barry in August of 2021. She was picking sweet peas when she tumbled over some bricks in her raised beds and broke her hip. She waited 3 hours for the ambulance to arrive. Barry had surgery the following morning and spent 10 days recovering in the hospital. Barry told the Mirror, "It's quite frightening to break your hip because it's painful and you think you're never going to get better. You can't do your shoelaces up, you certainly can't get your trousers on, and you think, gosh, am I going to be like this all the time?" Even after surgery, she had a noticeable limp and needed a cane to get around. But Barry was determined to get back to work, and physiotherapy helped make it possible in just over a year. While she could stand just fine, Barry wanted to be able to walk straight before she started filming. In September 2022, the 87-year-old returned to work with the launch of a new show, Mary Berry, Cook and Share, in which she travels around the UK cooking and sampling food.